We're here today again with Rabbi David Ingber, Rabbi of Congregation Romu in New York City, to continue our conversation for the program Profiles of Faith on the 6th of January 2015, 15 of Tvat. Shalom, Rabbi.
Shalom, Sally.
And thank you for taking the time to be here with us.
My pleasure.
Dear Rabbi, you shared with us how you were inspired during your Israel gap year before college. Can you tell us more about how you felt? What rocked you?
Wow, I'll never forget that year. I was 18 years old, and I went with my brother, my twin brother Adam, and I went. Having grown up in a modern Orthodox community, and we went to Israel like all good modern Orthodox New Yorkers. We went to be strengthened in our Yiddishkeit, in our Judaism, and to come back to America to go to college and to be committed and observant. So September of 1987, I arrived in Israel, and a friend of mine made a vow on my behalf, which I don't think is okay to do. He made a neder, and he basically made me vow to finish all of Mishnah, all of the oral law, 520 more prakim chapters of Mishnah. That was the beginning of my experience. I started learning very, very seriously, and from learning very seriously, I became very committed to prayer. So that year in Israel became a portal, a doorway into an experience of prayer that was, at times, I was praying for an hour every time that I prayed. So 3 hours a day of prayer, of meditation. And so that year became a pivotal experience of connection with Hashem, with the divine. In fact, the power of that year was so profound, that year was so powerful for me, that even when it continued for years after that, my religious observance and my commitment to Yiddishkeit continued, and then subsequently I left Yiddishkeit for a long time. It was the power of that ember that I had experienced, the power of that coal that was ignited, that gap year in Israel.
Diffusion.
It didn't go away. It didn't matter where I went, I always remembered that year of dveikut, of connection to God, of falling in love with Yiddishkeit, with Judaism, with my commitment to Eretz Israel, to the land of Israel. And so regardless of where I went after that, it was that year in Israel that was with me always. It's what brought me back, really.
We have to remember that you went to yeshiva, Ramaz, for...
Yeah, I went to Ramaz 6th grade through 12th grade. So 6 years.
6 years. Your whole formative young years before going to Israel, you're supposed to pray. What happened? A lot of young people go to yeshiva, and then they don't see the value of it. They take it for granted. What would you say? I
mean, for me, I'm a religious personality to begin with. Like even when I was a kid, I go like NCSY. I go on a Shabbaton, and I was the guy that was most likely to from out. That was like under my high school book. I'd be the guy that was most likely to become like a crazy from guy. So I already had religious inclinations from a young age. I remember very young being drawn to religious conversations about philosophy, about theology. Those were the things that I was interested in. So I already had a predisposition to that.
So why didn't it happen in Ramaz?
So there were other things going on in Ramaz and in my own personal life and in the life of the way that I grew up that drew my attention. But I think in general, I just want to say that the immersive experience of yeshiva in Israel, you don't have homework, you get together and in some way you're turned on to a Jewish learning and prayer environment that reminds you of the way it was in the old country in certain ways. There was a sense of deep immersion from the moment that we woke up in the morning until the moment we went to bed at night. We were surrounded by people who valued Talmud Torah, learning Torah, who valued davening, and they took it seriously. I mean, I don't in any way mean for this to cast aspersions on the communities that I came from or on modern Orthodoxy or Ramaz. There are amazing people in all of those communities. But there's a joke that I often tell that when I try to talk about my experience in Israel for that first year, it goes like this, Mrs. Schwartz come to her rabbi, she says, Rabbi Goldstein, you have to come and help me. My son's in his room and he's not coming out. And he's sitting and learning Torah all day. So the rabbi says, okay, what's wrong with that? She says, no, you don't understand. He sits and he learns Torah all day and he's praying all day and the rabbi's like, what's wrong with that, Mrs. Schwartz? That's, She says, Rabbi Goldstein, you didn't hear me. All day. So he says, no, that's what I do. And she says, yeah, but Rabbi, he means it. So I was exposed to a culture in Israel of a religious and spiritual life where every moment was a potential moment for being logged on
You're
to
plugged
God.
in.
You're plugged in. You're plugged in. Every moment was a God moment, and you could be learning Torah, you could be doing mitzvahs. It was a completely different thing. Now that could either be a huge turnoff, right? That could be either you show like it's too intense, it's too much. I don't believe it. But for me, as a really passionate 18-year-old kid, like as soon as the switch flipped, man, I was learning Mishnayos Baal Peh, I was learning Mishnah by heart.
And
I was walking in the streets of Jerusalem. I couldn't wait to sing a niggin, to sing a melody that had no words to it. I wanted to be connected to God at all moments. It was like WGOD, God 24/7. I wanted to be in the zone, what they call, the spiritual masters called the Vekut, to Midi. Like I wanted to be logged on all the time.
And God was a local call.
You know, in Eretz Yisrael, God is a local call. You know, they say about the Kutzker that someone once came and said to the Kutzker, where's God? And the Kutzker Rabbi, the Menachem Mendel of Kutz, said, wherever we let God in.
That's beautiful. So, following that year, you decided to continue learning, not going to regular college, right?
Oh, no, I wasn't going back to the United Fakes of America. That's what they called it in the Yeshiva. I did eventually come back, but under one stipulation that I was going to go to Yeshiva University, but I wasn't going to be in the college. And after two semesters at Yeshiva University, it wasn't religious enough for me, and so I went shopping in Brooklyn for a yeshiva that would fit my needs. I went yeshiva shopping.
So you turned black.
So I was already, to some degree, I was already black in Yeshiva University, but I certainly went, I went to buy wholesale. I wasn't going to buy retail. I went all the way to Brooklyn, and I went to a couple of different yeshivas, and the one that spoke the most English and was most welcoming to me was Yeshiva Chaim Berlin, or as my sisters lovingly called it, Chamberlain.
So you spent a few years there until you found it a little oppressive, a little...
I'll tell you a story. So my first experience at Chaim Berlin was an interview, a faher with the Rosh Yeshiva. I sat in his office and he asked me how old I was. I said I was 20 years old. He said, oh, you look 26. I thought, I should have been insulted, but I wasn't. And I said to him, I love that number. Thank you so much. He said, why? I said, 26 is the numerical value, of course, of the Tetragrammaton, of God's holy name. The Yud He Vav He YHVH is 26 numerically. Thank you for giving me Shem Havaya. I said it with a wink and a smile. And he looked at me, leaned back in his seat with his big, long, white beard, and he put his yarmulke forward, and he said to me, young man, you're going to come to this yeshiva. If you come to this sacred center for learning, you will learn Talmud, Gemara, Rashi, Tosfos, and you can keep the Kabbalah and the Yudei Vav Heis on the outside. Mm-hmm. So from the minute I walked into Chaim Berlin, I was exposed to a very regimented Lithuanian Talmudic education for 2 years, and I struggled mightily. I would catch moments where I could learn machshava, some Jewish thought. It was a very powerful environment. Prayer in Chaim Berlin was beautiful. I remember vividly the high holidays, the Yamim Noraim in Chaim Berlin was powerful. The Purim, they had like a 25-piece orchestra, because Chaim Berlin is a shtickle Hasidish. Chaim Berlin is both Lithuanian and in some ways acts as a Hasidic court because of Huttner, the way that he was.
So how did Hasidim become so Talmudic?
I think that every revival movement, which Hasidism was originally a revivalist movement, becomes as a yearning to move from the margins towards the center. And the center, of course, of Jewish life was always Talmud. And so various Hasidic courts began to incorporate more of the traditional learning structures and moved away slightly from a focus on an emphasis on Kabbalah and so on. But when I left Chaim Berlin, I left because, as you said, I felt oppressed. I felt in so many ways that the system of orthodoxy that I had been exposed to had within it certain dysfunctional elements, some things that now in my current rabbinate, in my current expression of Judaism, some of the bathwater that we don't want. And so what pushed me out was, I think, some of the dysfunction, some of the unhealthy patterns of orthodoxy and theologies and so on. So
you went out to flush this out and come back with the original you.
That's what I always said, Sully. When I left, people said, what are you going to, they said to me, you're going to come back at some point to Judaism. I said I will, but I hope that the time away will give me a chance to flush out, to do birur, to clarify what was beautiful and what wasn't. I wanted to purify my own experience of Yiddishkeit from toxic elements.
So you took a time out, you didn't break away. You knew that at the time?
I always thought that I was going to come back. I just didn't know when I would come back and how.
As you're talking about the shift of Hasidut from its original mission to the more Litvak side, I realized that this is a modus operandi that is happening to every renewal system. Like, take modern Orthodoxy. The famous line when I asked Rabbi Ingber, I reminded him that he said once, in the 60s I was on the right, in the 80s I was in the center, and 2000 I'm on the left, and I never changed my mind. Because the movement itself, they have to be more orthodox and they forget about the mission. So everybody's moving to the right is because there is a fear of not being taken seriously. But in the process of being approved of, they lose their soul, or they lose their mission statement. Or what did you call it once? Every yeshiva should be audited at the end of the year according to Rev Dave's annual yearning statement.
I don't know about my annual yearning statement, but if you've ever had a chance in your life to meet a tzaddik or a tzaddikess, if you're ever really with somebody who's God-infused. I once had the suchos, I had the merit to go meet Rav Pinchas Scheinberg, Shalom. And I think I was immediately taken by the intimacy. I didn't feel him as a religious man. He was wearing 90 pairs of tzitzis, and he was walking around with his tefillin on. But my experience of him wasn't that he was religious. My experience of him was that he was completely God intoxicated. And that through all of these kelim, and I don't want to, all these vessels, all these vehicles, he was trying to touch a living, organic, alive thing. El Chai V'Kayam. My experience when I was with him or when I was with other people, my own Rabbi, Alav Shalom, Rabbi Zalman Shakir Shalom, Alav Shalom, and then Rav Shlomo Carlebach, Alav Shalom. Like, my desire, my yearning, is to be in the presence of the living Spirit, the living God.
How would you say it to a 5-year-old?
To a 5-year-old, I would say, you know that feeling you get when your Abba's looking at you and your Imma's looking at you, and you just know that we love you so much? That's the feeling. Hashem loves you so much. Hashem is always watching you. You're always in Hashem's presence.
So is that what you try to emulate, bring out in people when you talk? Constantly I see you reflecting and checking with yourself. Is that what you're saying? Am I doing it? Am I connecting?
When I'm in the presence of God, when I have a felt sense that I'm in the presence of the infinite, or the experience of being seen and loved by a loving presence, that is also meaning and purpose, then my whole being can relax to some degree, that my heart is open. And then I'm able to be with people in a way that's loving and compassionate, where they really felt seen.
So you learn from Rav Scheinberg and others who are connected. You have a real picture in your mind, and you're just trying to describe it to people who can't hear the music.
I think that more than anything, we all know, to some extent, what it feels like to be in the presence of love. We all know what it feels like to be in the presence of compassion, non-judgment. We all know what it feels like, what it happens to us, our bodies, our hearts, our minds, when we're in the experience of the sacred. And what I'm trying to say to people is that Judaism is a vocabulary of the sacred. It is a full language of the holy. And just as the Eskimos have many, many different words for snow, we Jews have developed many, many different words and many, many different contexts for this thing called love, for compassion, for intimacy, for sacred. And so when I'm speaking to people, I'm trying to say, hey, let's all wake up. Let's wake up. Let's Ta'amur Ukito Hashem. It's happening here. It's in the present moment. It's in these eyes that are across from us. It's in this moment that we're witnessing. So I use language, and my ministry, my rabbinate, is to say, God's here.
Love, love, love.
Yeah.
But for you, love is God. It's not just love, like Beatles or Eastern or meditation or then love is our Jewish God.
God is real. Judaism is a vehicle for recognizing the real, right? And when we're in the presence of the real, right? When we're in the presence of the real, it can manifest as love. It can manifest as sadness. It can be all of those things. I'm always a little bit nervous about saying God is, but primarily, Olam Chesed Yibaneh. God is an experience of what is Chesed, what is love, and love is an expression of the real, right? When we are in the presence of the Holy says to us, "I love you."
It's beautiful. So there are a lot of great things out there.
Sure.
You know, climbing the Kilimanjaro makes me inspired, and Buddhism is great.
Sure.
And, skiing, I feel connected. But Judaism is not just a high. Why is Judaism more important than just being vegetarian? Going and volunteering for Peace Corps and doing great things.
You know, Rabbi David Hartman had a phrase he used to call mishpachtology. And my answer is, and I'm sure there are many different answers that various rabbis will give. I can tell you the answer I won't give. I won't tell you Judaism is compelling because it's the only way. I won't invite you into a conversation about the codes that are inside of the Torah. For me, Judaism is beautiful and it is stunningly compelling as a spiritual system. And if someone comes to me and sits in my office and says, "Rabbi, I'm Jewish, why should I be interested in Judaism?" I'd say, you don't have to be, but oh, are you missing out on such an amazing meal? Oh, are you missing out? And my responsibility as a rabbi, as a parent, as a teacher, as an emissary and an ambassador of Judaism is to say, Judaism is the oldest Western tradition that we have, and it has a full menu of spiritual experiences, of communal covenant, of relationships, of ethics, of morals, of thought, and wow, what a meal. Now, if somebody says to me, "Rabbi, that's wonderful, right? But I'm really not hungry anymore. I'm eating my Buddhist meal." I'd say, listen, if you're eating your Buddhist meal, it's a shame to me that you haven't tasted your own Jewish meal. It's a shame to me that you think that they can't coexist. My loving response would be, is a way for you to have both of them.
You can have it all.
I personally think that cross-training spiritually, like CrossFit, that what we now know in the 21st century requires that we are open to the spiritual technologies that are not within our tradition in order to support and fill out our typical tradition. I'll give you an example. If somebody comes to my office and knocks on the door and says, "Rabbi Ingber, is there a problem with my doing yoga? Is there a problem with my doing Vipassana Buddhist meditation?" So there are many synergies. I say to them, listen, did you know that the son of the Rambam, Avram ben Rambam, incorporated Sufi practices into Judaism? So my most important message is, the greatest have to is want to. And me, I have to teach myself and others that Judaism is so delicious, it's so wonderful, that you can't wait. You're chalashing. You can't wait for Shabbos to come. As soon as I light those candles, it's Shabbos Menucha. As soon as we start singing Ningen on Friday night and Shabbos afternoon, it's Geval. When I put on my tefillin, when I put on my tzitzis, when I talk in Torah, when I read when I hear something beautiful, and that's our morasha, that's our inheritance. Halavai, that I'd be,
Let's go full circle. What was there in the body movement, in the meditation, and the Oriental spiritual beyond, where you have traveled, that connected you back to Judaism, where so many others turned away? What brought you back?
There are immediate, tangible, experiential benefits to meditative practice. It calms the mind, it opens the heart, it relaxes the body, it reduces stress.
The empiric studies that show.
Empirical studies. The Buddha himself was less interested in theology and in a systematic approach to life as he was in practical things that actually change how we perceive the world. Literally, not an idea, but an actual practice. Number two, there was something about yoga that also opened my body, right, which had an immediate relationship with my experience of the world. My body became more open, and my mind became more pliant and softer. Both of those systems had immediate nutritional value for my spiritual life. I didn't have to buy into a system. I didn't have to affirm a theology or an ideology of any kind. There were practices and results.
The deep Talmudized you.
Very much. But what they didn't have, what brought me back to Yiddishkeit, was a number of things. One, and whether this is relevant for other people, I grew up in Yiddishkeit. I grew up in Judaism. It was my mama Lashon. I grew up with my father singing, Yavad Ribon Olam Ve'olmayam. My earliest memories of my father wearing the talit, the dew blanket of love that says, God is everywhere in all four corners of the world. There's nowhere to hide, and nowhere we want to hide. We want to be under your talis, God. And that's where I wanted to be. And I said this last time, that when I was under my father's talis, when the Kohanim, when the priests would bless the community, that memory was always his hand on my cheek forever. That was one. Two, Yiddishkeit. There's a sacred sense of time. There's an organismic quality. There's so many things about the beauty of the Jewish system that spoke to me. An organic quality to time. The calendar of Judaism is so aligned with seasons and the organic nature, the way that you feel in the various seasons. Pesach, Passover with spring and renewal. Shavuot with the beginning of the summer.
The calendar is personal.
The calendar is personal. The calendar is aligned with the rhythms of our mother, the earth, and our own cultural rhythms. We feel into the calendar, and also the way that we celebrate it. Nine, 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 nine. Ah, ya, 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 da, 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 dum. Ah, ya, da, da. And you feel
Rosh
Hashanah. So I was already in the system. And the third thing is, when I thought about how Judaism has mysticism and ecstasy, it has body, it has dance, it has song, it's a full package. I thought, how could I walk away from something that is so in my kishkis? So Judaism and the East, by the way, I think that they make it's a good sandwich.
Interestingly enough, the East developed totally disconnected from the West, and in a way we are we cover the world from both sides. The Judaism and its parallel sister of Eastern mysticism cover the world.
It's so true, and it's always about, for me, coming home.
Yeah.
When somebody sits in my office and says, Rabbi, why be Jewish? I say to them, it's yours. It belongs to you. You're born into this tradition. And just take whatever you found and just bring it home.
So beautiful. Is there a male-female between mysticism and Talmud?
Certainly, there are those who thought that way in terms of right brain versus left brain. Some would say that in Talmud there are stories and more discursive left brain.
Midrash is
the right brain, and then there's the left brain, which is the more logical. Within Kabbalah also, there's always this marriage happening between sense and soul.
So let's talk about spirituality. How would you explain it to your son? How would you explain it to your Zayde Ali?
He passed away a long time ago. My sons, Bear and Tal, they're already in it. They don't really need an explanation. What they do to us in their good moments is give us a taste of what it's like to be in the presence of the spirituality. The way that we are with our children, the gentleness, the tenderness, the kindness that we show those children is the way that God, the divine, the way that he is looking at us. And that's a taste of spirituality. The spirituality is the taste of an open heart.
So all of our life we're trying to explain what the flower smells like, but spirituality is the actual smell of the flower.
The experience of it, yeah. It's the hand that you have touching the world without the glove of your defenses.
Beautiful metaphor. Speaking of spirituality, is it the end product? Is it the byproduct? Or the beginning of it all?
It's funny because to think of it as an end product, as an end, means that it's something that you get. And to think of it as a means that it's something that's instrumental. So you get caught in both of those. My experience is it's simply what happens when the heart is open and we have a different experience of the present moment. It's what the Baal Shem Tov said, when the eyes of the flesh are open.
In a way, spirituality is like oxygen. Whenever you went without a breath for a while, all of a sudden,
I'm not the hugest fan of the word spirituality, by the way. I think what people mean by that is when people are turned on, or they're inspired, or when people are moved. I think we use all of these terms interchangeably. I would prefer the term awake.
Okay, so renewal 101. Being spiritual, being awake. Can you be spiritual and not religious?
Absolutely.
We all yearn for something, and you, Reb Dave, in the way of renewal, connecting the old and the new, that nut and bolt.
To reconnect, that's the word religion, is from religare, ligament, is something that connects that which would otherwise fall apart. Religion's purpose was to help give us a sense of the whole, not pieces torn apart, but a sense of meaning that comes from the whole.
Shlomo Neshama, return to
who you are, to what you are, to where you are born and reborn again. A return to the wholeness, the shleimut.
Right.
So if religion means a return to wholeness, then spirituality, in my opinion, and religion are actually synonymous. But more often, if people say religion, must one be an adherent and observant of a particular religion's creeds or ritual forms in order to be spiritual, I'd say absolutely not. And often, unfortunately for us, those in the business of religion, we see people who are doing the forms without the inner content. And they're not using the forms, the lighting of the candles, the going to shul, the wearing of the talit in order to connect into that larger wholeness that we are always a part of, that feeling you have when you're about to see my boys.
So the religion
is
a format, is a language of spirituality.
Right, and if it's done appropriately, then it yields that fruit.
So somebody said it in one of these interviews, he said, spirituality is the current, and religion is the conduit. The current runs in the conduit. Conduit is a way to make it, harness it to our lives. You know, there's a lot of prejudice against the word spiritual or renewal because people feel threatened by it. They think it takes religion to places where it shouldn't go, and it's not l'shem shamayim. And they use examples that people who got lost and made it their own trip. They lost the format.
The roots.
The conduit.
Yeah.
So how do you keep the current in the conduit? How do you keep the spiritual self into the religious format? Especially for people who never were under talis, who never heard the Zayde sing Yaribon, who never had the flavor. How did they find something they never knew?
All spiritual energy needs a conduit in order to make it available. Whether it's lighting candles, whether it's the ritual of picking up my children from school, these are all forms that produce that spiritual feeling. So there is no proven way for me to keep people in.
You're a davener.
Yeah.
Speaking of davening, is prayer a way to reach God? Or is prayer the way to prepare us to be in God's space, to change ourselves?
It's both.
Wow, how can you reach God? You know, do you see this Bruce Almighty?
Yeah.
Remember when he has all the stickies?
Yeah.
Imagine like 6-7 billion people sending you texts simultaneously. I mean, God can do it, but do you really think he's a bookkeeper?
No.
No.
Do you mean reaching God, experiencing God, or do you mean reaching God with a petition?
Rain, rain, go away, come again another day.
So
little David wants to play, right?
Right.
This is a prayer.
Here's my answer. My 5-year-old son this morning, Bear, I said to him, Bear, it's snowing outside. I said, I'm not going to go to school for snowing. He said, I'm going to go talk to Hashem, and he's going to stop it from snowing. So Bear said to me, he said, Abba, Hashem is very strong and doesn't listen to you. He'll do what he wants to do. And I said, that's right, Bear.
So what is prayer?
Prayer is placing ourselves in the presence of a loving God and accessing our own need to speak and to communicate with that source. And that itself is transformative. That itself is powerful.
We live in an individuality worship era. And yet praying is supposed to be done in a minyan, together. This contradiction is basically a very loaded topic. Tell me
Yeah.
how is it for you?
There was a yogi sage who said that the word illness begins with an I, and the word wellness begins with a we. We need each other. We need a tzibur, we need a minyan. The tzibur, the community, raises the water level of each individual. I walk into davening, I feel schleppy. Okay, it's not about me. The minute I sit down to pray, I start to sing a niggun, nine, 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 and the person next to me begins to sing, and there's a harmony. And then we go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 10 to a tzibur, to a sangha, to a community, a kihila. And it is actually the redemption of the individual comes about through the self-transcendence of the individual in the community, right? The I becomes the we, but doesn't lose the I.
So we have a collective heart, an individual heart. When I look at fish or at birds that swim or fly in unison and turn together as one, without instructions, I wonder about the collective mind that frees us from ourselves. Who do we yearn to be? Are we stuck individuals who want to be in a flock and be free from ourselves? Or are we flocked individuals who go back to our individual heart?
The way that you frame it is beautiful, but it's also flawed because I don't think we're either or. We're both and. We, like every other level of reality, are both individuals, I's, who also know our own I through the we. From the moment that we're born, we're in a relationship already with our mother. The way that we become an I is through an intersubjectivity.
You are correct. We cannot be born collectivized. We are born individualized. There's a system here, which is you're born to one set of parents who are going to do the best to make you whole.
But you're also social because it's not just in the flock. The way that it works, in my experience, is to say that this is a dialectic, it's a dynamic tension between two truths. The tzibur, or the collective mind, is too strong. It doesn't allow for uniqueness and individuality. Individuality rears its head up, and they move this way. So there is something beautiful happening in our culture with its emphasis on individualism was a corrective for an overemphasis on collectivity.
It was such an amazing moment when you said that Hanukkah or whatever it was, when you said Shmoneh Esrei, any way you want, but stand up. So you were saying individually, I allow you to be who you are, but stand up, adhere to our
some communal
norm. And that was correct in my mind. You were telling people there is a language, there's a format. And yet other times, I mean, yes, in dance, everybody can do what they want, but there's a limit to that freedom. You have to allow that dance to be a ritual, not only a free for all.
It's such a great question, Saul. You have a way, it's amazing, you have a way of identifying these tensions. I think we began, I asked you to ask me if what I'm doing at Rambam was new. I think what Reb Zalman might, Alav Shalom, what he began was altogether new. But if you look at what Reb Zalman did, it was in certain ways, but in other ways he was also
connecting.
He was himself...
he called it backward compatible.
Backward compatible to Martin Buber and to Hillel Zeitlin, and then to other neo-Hasidic pioneers in the turn of the 19th and 20th century. And then if you look back at the way of the Baal Shem Tov, Alav Shalom, the tension between innovation and creativity. You look at Ramamun and you look at BJ, the great conservative synagogue of the 80s, 90s, and now still to this day. They also were bringing in a lot of different moments, and Ramamun was trying to do that too. And if you ask me about the individualism of our culture and bringing it into davening, I think that there's still that dance between what we did before and what we need to do now.
You use an old tool of shake-up so that there are no litvak sitting down. Do you see it necessary to break the barriers in order to connect? Hugging, dancing is important so that we become participants and not just passive audience? Or is it just your sense of love that wants to welcome everybody into our great tradition? Tell me this. This is really, I see you as this cloud of love and cloud of knowledge. And it's like a mother or a father who tells the child who doesn't want to eat the peas or go to school or go to sleep, says, listen, you gotta do it.
It's also a dance. I want to respect individual preferences, and I know that not everybody likes the same style as I like. We all have our different radio stations, our different playlists, our different playlists. But I think that sometimes we need a push. Sometimes we need someone to go, an Achshon ben Aminadav, who not only goes into the river up to his nose, but also says, hey, I'm in this dance right now. Try once, see what happens. And we become so, we might have an inclination not to do something, and that might be coming from a place of preference. That's fine. But we also might be doing it because we got lazy, or we just thought, it won't work. I really liked it. I have to tell you a personal story. There's somebody very close to me in my family, and I know that this person is a Hasidic person head to toe. And whenever I see this person and he comes to shul, or I see him in something, it takes a moment for him to remember who he really is. And if there's a song and they're dancing, he's the first one he's not the first one, he's the second one to jump in. If you say to him, come on in, and then he's alive, he's transformed. And he's in a world where they don't do that. So he's always trying to do it with schnapps and with herring. But if he only was in a Hasidic place, I say, wow, he should have been a Hasidic guy.
So I have a new mission statement for you.
Okay.
You see, Rav Bravender already started teaching online, the web yeshiva, right? And other people are having shiurs online. But where is the online connectivity of Jews? So going to shul is writing a letter, tweeting. I just saw this amazing, thing is being. So I think we need Judaism that is online, not only as a teaching moment, but as a being moment. Imagine a 24/7 minyan, kind of online connectivity. You just turn on your tablet, and there's davening going on of people online.
Prayer channel.
Prayer channel sounds too
Christian.
evangelical. There is a Rav Dave channel, a Rav Zalman channel, just being people, a Rav Shlomo channel, bringing like Romamu 24/7. Let's cut forward, because when you sang the Siyari Bon from Beit Abba, I thought, I want it now.
Yeah.
Why don't you give us the Yari Bon, the full song that you remember from Beit Abba?
Shvachi no sader tzafra veramsha Lach elo kadisha li v'rakol nafsham Irin kadishin u'neyen nashava Hey bas berava Of Shemaya Baba Yaribon Olam Ve'almaya Aletuma Kamelech Malechayo.
Now I'm coming to your show. I think everybody's watching it is coming to your show. Can you stay in that?
It's my father's show.
Can you stay in that mode?
Sure.
How many pairs of tzitzis do you have to wear to be in that place?
That's exactly the question.
Thank you for this. This is great.